too, so I think I'll go ahead and get started. First of all, let's see, Kelsey and Cecile, can you give me just a thumbs up or a wave if the volume is okay? Okay, great, excellent. So why don't we start off recording? It is recorded, great. So just a heads up that this meeting is being recorded so that we can post it on the Water Board YouTube channel so that folks that might not have been able to participate can watch the recording. So thank you everyone for coming. I'm Jennifer Epp. I'm the Waste Discharge Requirements Program Manager at the Central Coast Water Board. And we're here today to talk about the general permit for domestic wastewater treatment systems that are 100,000 gallons per day or greater that discharge to land. So thanks everyone for taking the time. I will briefly introduce a couple of the project teammates who will be presenting today. And let's start with Howard. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Howard Kolb. I'm staff here at the Water Board. I help craft the current draft permit that we're going to review today. And I work for Jennifer.
Great. And Kelsey, can you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Kelsey Gerhardt. I'm a water resource control engineer here in Region 3. I work in both the WDR program and the site cleanup program, and I also assisted with the preparation of this general permit.
Great, thanks Howard and Kelsey. And it looks like we have a nice turnout today, which is good. So this is the second of 4 virtual meetings that we're doing during the public comment period in order to both provide information to you as well as to enable the opportunity to ask questions. And so today we just have a short presentation for you, and what we're going to do is we're going to review some background material that we shared back in February because some folks didn't participate in those discussions. And then last week, if you joined us for the meeting, we shared some of the key tables with the draft permit, and we're going to today go over those tables again, provide a little bit more detail because they're fairly significant components of the permit, and we'll help clarify some of the questions that have come up over the last few days. And then we will also provide an opportunity for anyone to ask questions. Oops, sorry, let me get to the right, apologize. Okay. So we're here today to talk about a draft permit. And the first question that comes up always is, who does this draft permit apply to? And so this permit applies to domestic wastewater facilities. And so those facilities are the types of facilities that receive wastewater from toilets, bathrooms, and homes, but not industrial processing facilities. So for example, our wineries would not enroll in this permit. And it covers the facilities in the Central Coast region, which is approximately Santa Cruz to Santa Barbara here on the coast, a little bit of Santa Clara and San Benito County as well. And we are talking about, for this permit, discharges to land, so not discharges to water bodies, so not NPDES permits. Those are different permits, and any facilities that discharge to a surface water body would not be covered on this permit. And then the permit covers our larger facilities, so the ones that have a permitted flow of greater than 100,000 gallons per day. Go to the next slide. Okay. And then, as many of you know, we have another general permit that covers our smaller domestic facilities. And so the question that came up last week of which permit would apply to which facility is we have a lot of facilities that are close to that 100,000 gallons per day. And so would they go into the one permit or would they go into the other permit? And the short answer to that is if your permitted flows in the permit allows you to discharge greater than 100,000 gallons per day, that would need to be handled by this draft permit that we're working on. If your permit restricts you to only discharging less than 100,000 gallons per day, then you would fall under an existing general permit that has been out since 2014, and it's called 2014-0153. So that's the difference between the permit that we're talking about today, which is a draft, as well as the permit that already exists for smaller facilities. And I wanted to review some information that we provided back in February about the various permits that we have for discharges to land here at the Central Coast region. So if you look at all the domestic wastewater permits we have in the Central Coast region that discharge to land, the Water Board issues two different types of permits. We have what we call a general permit and we have individual permits. And general permits are permits where they're adopted by our board for a whole group of facilities, and then at the staff level, we enroll people in that permit. An individual permit, on the other hand, is where each facility has a specific permit that's been tailored for their facility, and those are adopted by our board directly, as well as any updates to those permits go back to the board for renewal. So the permit we're talking about today is the latter, a general permit. And this graph here shows the various permitted domestic wastewater facilities that we have in the Central Coast region. So in blue, you can see we have about 50 facilities that are covered by a general permit for small systems, less than 100,000 gallons a day. In gray, you see we do have some individual permits for some small systems as well. And then what we're here to talk about today is those facilities that are shown by the orange group. And those are the permits for larger facilities that all currently have individual permit. And so those individual permits, typically we would update them every 5 to 10 years, but some of those permits are very old. And so next I will show you some of the details about this orange group of permits. So this slide shows in very small font the 44 facilities that are greater than 100,000 gallons per day that we have individual permits for in the Central Coast region. And our plan with this general permit that we're drafting is to enroll the majority and almost all of these facilities in that new permit. There is likely a couple facilities that we wouldn't. For example, the Monterey 1 facility, Pure Water Monterey, is a very complex system with multiple permits, and we would keep them in their current existing individual permit, and we would not enroll them in this permit. This next graphic just shows where those permits are located. So the majority of those 44 facilities are located in Monterey County, as well as significant amounts in Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo, with just a couple in San Benito and Santa Cruz. And this slide shows the different technology that those those facilities utilize. And so the majority of them, or at least the largest percentage of them, is our ponds. And then we also have 13 activated sludge facilities and 7 biofiltration facilities, as well as a couple sequencing batch reactors and one that's an advanced water treatment system. And one of the main reasons, if you've heard us in previous presentations, is that we want to do this permit is that those individual permits are really inconsistent. And a lot of that has to do with just how old they are. Some of them are very old. And so if you look at those permits, this is how they vary in terms of whether or not they even have some of the basic effluent limits in them. So you can look at this chart here and you can see that many of our permits have BOD limits and TSS limits, but many of them do not. And similarly with salts and nitrogen, we have the majority of facilities that have no nitrogen limits. And then further within the permits themselves, even the ones that do have limits, those limits are very inconsistent. And a lot of that just depends on how old they are and when we wrote that permit. And so one of the big things we're doing here with this draft permit is to really make things more consistent throughout the region. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Howard for the next slides.
Thank you, Jennifer. Can you hear me good? Okay. I'm going to now talk about some of the particulars of the order as it's written. We're going to go through 4 subsets of the limitations, and you can see them here on the screen: technology-based, select constituents, etc. Water board staff will be evaluating these 4 subsets of limitations once we get an application and we start working with you going through the enrollment process. In the next few slides, I'll cover the technology-based and selected constituents, and then I'll hand it over to Kelsey and she'll cover the last 2 bullet points. Next slide. This flow chart that you're looking at is not in the permit, but it is something that the water board will be using and will be available to dischargers as a tool to go through and figure out what effluent limitations apply to them. So if you look across the top, you'll see it says treatment system type, and you can just quickly go across and see what type of system you have. And then the next box down shows the effluent limitation. So if you're a pond, you'd go to table 3. If you're a trickling filter, you go to table 4. And then similarly, if you're looking for your monitoring requirements, you could go on down and find those monitoring requirements in the monitoring program. So going with activated sludge, we'd look at table 5. Next slide. Here is what that would look like if you went into the table, and you can see it has BOD, suspended solids, settleable solids, etc., and the limits that would apply to your facility. Next slide, please. Similarly, if you were looking, we have another flow chart that shows how you'd go through for the select constituents. You would come up to table 6, and if you had phenols, you would go to table 6 and you would see what the limits are for your particular facility. That's a real quick overview of how we would go through it, and we would do this for each one of those 4 parameters or 4 subsets of limitations. And now I'm going to hand it over to Kelsey, and she'll go through the next 2.
Thank you, Howard, and hello, everyone. I'm Kelsey. So as Howard has indicated, there are 4 different subsets of effluent limitations specified in this general permit. And these effluent limitations need to be evaluated at the time of the application and enrollment process to determine how they apply to your specific wastewater system. So Howard just walked us through the first 2 subsets of effluent limitations, the first being the technology-based, and then the second being dependent upon the raw wastewater characteristics. The third subset of effluent limitations that I'll walk us through are conditional and are based upon the Basin Plan median water quality objectives, the agriculture water quality goals, and the maximum contaminant levels for drinking water, also referred to as the MCLs. So shown on the slide, the discharger is presented 2 options, option 1 being on the left side of this flow chart. So the discharger elects to comply with effluent limitations specified in Table 7 of the general permit. And I'll walk through Table 7 in the next slide. But again, Table 7 includes the median water quality objectives, the agricultural water quality goals, and the MCLs. So if the discharger chooses to proceed with option 1, they must demonstrate that the quality of effluent discharge from the wastewater system meets these effluent limitations. And if the discharger is unable to comply with those effluent limitations, they may be required to implement a groundwater monitoring program, which brings us over to option number 2, which is shown on this right side of the flow chart. So if the discharger elects not to treat the wastewater to the effluent limitations specified in Table 7, the discharger will be required to implement a groundwater monitoring program and demonstrate that underlying water quality is not being impacted and or degraded. Next slide, please. So this slide shows a subset of Table 7. As mentioned on the previous slide, the dischargers are required to demonstrate that the effluent leaving the wastewater system is not degrading underlying water quality. Again, this is done through either the adoption of effluent limitations in Table 7, as shown here on this slide, or through the implementation of a groundwater monitoring program. So then I wanted to take the time to briefly walk you through how to apply Table 7 to your wastewater system. So if your disposal or treatment area overlies a designated groundwater basin, you are required to comply with Basin Plan Table 3-6. If not, you are required to comply with the MCLs and the Basin Plan Agricultural Water Quality Goals, which is shown on the right side of this table. A discharger may also request executive officer approval to adopt water quality objectives from an adjacent designated basin. And the text of the general permit does walk the discharger through how to apply Table 7, but of course, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to staff. We're happy to walk you through it. Next slide, please. And the fourth subset of effluent limitations applies to non-potable recycled water producers. So if treated non-potable recycled water from the wastewater system is discharged to land for the purposes of reuse, the discharger must comply with the following. With the effluent limitations specified in Table 8, which are shown on this slide here, with the requirements established in the Division of Drinking Water's Conditionally Accepted Title 22 Engineering Report, and with the Division of Drinking Water's Conditional Acceptance Letter prepared for the specific wastewater system. Next slide, please. And here's our contact information. Please do not hesitate to contact either Jennifer or myself with any questions that you may have. You may also reach out to Howard. He is going to be in and out of the office for the next few weeks, but he will also respond to any questions or comments that you guys may have. Thank you, and I will now hand it back to Jennifer.
Thanks, Kelsey. So this slide just is a reminder, if you weren't here with us last week, on where you can find the documents, and if you're not on our interested parties list, how to sign up, and a reminder when formal comments are due. And I'll also share my screen and show you guys this as well. And if you are on our interested parties list, you would have gotten an email from us yesterday that reminded you of the meeting today and also provided the PowerPoint presentation from last week. So I'm going to steal control over the screen here. And I'm going to go to this. So those links on the PowerPoint slide takes you to our webpage where we post our public notices and our draft permits. When we looked at this last week, ours was on the top, but now there's a newer one above it. So we are the second row here. And you can see the public notice is the first document, and that describes how you would submit formal comments if you'd like to submit formal comments. And the deadline to do that is July 20th in the morning. And then also has copies of the draft order and the various attachments. And then similarly, there's links to the email subscription form. And this is our Central Coast Water Board automated email list where you can sign up for all sorts of topics. And we are this one here in the top right-hand corner, which is the large domestic wastewater general order. Then I'm going to switch back to the presentation slides. So let's see, Tim, can you go ahead and pull up the presentation slides for me again? Thank you. And then can you go to the next slide? There we go. And then this is just a screenshot of what I just showed you online as well. And you can go to the next slide. And as we mentioned, we are, during the public comment period, having 4 different virtual meetings to both share information with you as well as to hear from you and answer your questions. We had one last week, we're having one this week. The meeting next week is on July 8th in the afternoon, and then we're having another one on July 15th. So far, we don't have any formal presentations planned for those meetings, but depending on what questions we get or information that we think people want us to share, we can certainly present some things, and we can also just join online and be available to answer any questions that people have as well. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over for questions. So let me pull up my participant list here. We have a nice group of folks. We have 32 people on the line, which is great. And so far, I don't think we had some of the technical difficulties that we had last week. We did figure out why we all got dropped for a few minutes during the middle, and we think we've resolved that, so it won't happen again. So I know some people are on the phone and some people are on the computer. So what I'll start with is if anyone wants to raise their hand if they're on the computer, and then we'll go through those questions first and then give an opportunity for those that don't have the ability to raise their hand to answer any questions. So does anyone have any questions? And a refresher on how to raise your hand. Let's see, I believe you go down to it's the participants list. You click on that. And then you'll see the list of participants, and at the bottom, you should see an option to raise your hand. It's a little bit different depending on what computer operating system you're using, if you're on a Mac or if you're on a PC. Okay, I see a question raised. Okay, so Shannon, go ahead and unmute yourself. You should be able to do that. Yeah, great. I saw that you unmuted yourself. And go ahead, Shannon.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
It's a little quiet. Howard, can you hear okay? I can barely hear.
Yes, I can hear you, Shannon.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer, Kelsey, and Howard. Two quick questions. The first one is, do you mind walking through table 2? It's the setbacks table. And I'm not sure I fully understand the second part of it. And then the second question is, what's the timing on this? There's information about how to apply, but it looks like there's going to be a lot of information that we might not have right now. So I'm curious to know how this is going to be rolled out and at what point various facilities will be required to pull all this information together. Thank you. I'll go offline.
Great question. So why don't I start with your first one, and then what I'll do as well is let me pull up the table 2 so that we have it for reference. So I'm going to steal control of the screen here. And I'm going to go to the web where I had the document pulled up. And then I'm going to go to the tentative orders, and I'm going to open up the order. I'm going to go to table 2 so that we have that for reference. It would help if I could spell the word table correctly, or at least type it. We're flying a little blind here because what we see on the screen is a little bit different than what we see on the computer here. Table. All right. Great. Okay, so we will pull that up. And then let me answer your second question about, and I think Shannon's question is about timeline for enrollment. So we are planning on bringing the permit itself to our board in September for approval. However, that won't actually enroll anybody in the permit. It'll essentially just set up the mechanism that we can enroll people in the permit. And then actually enrolling people in the permit will likely take some amount of time, and we would probably do it in phases where we start with what we consider our highest priority facilities. And those are going to be some of the facilities that either need a new permit because their existing permit's outdated, or their permits are very, very old and in most need of update. And so I would imagine that the enrollment process is going to take a while. I mean, I could see enrollments taking a year of, these 44 facilities, doing a few of them at a time. And you can chime in when we're done and see if that answered your specific questions about timing. But what we would do is we would contact folks, have them fill out the information, the notice of intent, the report of waste discharge information, and then we would use that information to enroll them in the permit. And then with table 2, I'm going to mute myself so that Howard can do that. And give me just a second, Howard, so I can mute myself. Come on. There we go. Just a second, Howard. I'm not getting my controls for muting myself, so I just need to, let's see, mute my audio.
And Shannon, to follow up on Jennifer's question about enrollment, the permit for Guadalupe that you currently are operating under is not reflected of your current upgrade to the facility. So you would be enrolled sooner rather than later, but there's no absolute timeline for that. And we would work with you to get the information together and then enroll you once we have all that compiled. So it'll take a little while. So what's your question specifically on table 2, or did you just want me to go through it? And
Okay, sorry. I should put something in my mouth, so sorry if I sound funny. Okay, So the second part of it, which is the land application area requirements. I see there's a footnote, and I probably didn't read the footnote. Are those square feet? So how big the square feet of the land application is?
No, that's linear separation from like a domestic well. You'd have to have 50 linear feet away from it. Or if it's a lake or a reservoir, you'd have to have 200 feet if we're looking at land application of disinfected tertiary recycled water.
Oh, okay. Now I see. I'm sorry. The area threw me off. The word area in that.
Okay.
So those are still distance in feet.
Yes.
So in our case, we would have probably an ephemeral stream drainage. So the boundary of our land application would have to be 50 feet away from the river. Am I reading that correctly?
Can you scroll down to?
Oh, that's right. I'm not disinfected.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So you would be the land application of undisinfected secondary. So those would be your setbacks there under the third box.
Okay. And I do believe that there was some place in the permit that talked about areas that might struggle with meeting that. Can talk to the staff and talk about how to address that.
Yes.
Okay, very good. And as far as the first question or the question regarding timing, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't like in 90 days we have to have all those reports because there's a climate change adaptation report that might take us a bit of time. So I'm wondering, Howard, since it sounds like we're a bit on the upper end of the list, that maybe we just talk about what kind of time frame we'll be able to work with to pull that data together.
If Jennifer, can you pull up the monitoring program? Those due dates for those various reports are in the monitoring program, and the climate change, I think we're allowing 24 months. So you
That's
have
correct.
Yeah, you have ample time to address that.
Oh, perfect. I'd have to admit I didn't get this far in the review, so now I see that information is there.
That's okay. That's why we're here. That's why we're having the meetings. We want to help people walk through the permit more quickly. We really do want everybody to be engaged and make sure they understand what we're proposing and how it might affect your facility and your community. So that's the intent of this meeting, as well as the next two, is bring us your questions, let us help you walk through the order and the monitoring program and figure out how it applies to your facility.
Very good. Thank you very much. I appreciate the information.
Absolutely.
And great questions, Shannon. And don't be afraid to ask us something that might be in the permit, because we know this permit very well. We can find stuff easier. It's a little bit harder for folks that are looking at this for the first time. So no problem. Any questions?
Awesome. Thank you.
Great. Okay. And looks like the next person that I see a hand raised is Trevor Ray. So if you want to unmute yourself, Trevor, and you have the floor. I see that you're unmuted, but I can't hear you. Can anyone else hear Trevor? No? So Trevor, we can't hear you. It does show that you're unmuted though, so that's not the problem. Any ideas for Trevor? Yeah, I don't think there is a chat feature available.
You can email.
Yeah. So Trevor, if you want to continue to try to figure out how to get audio, you can also call into the Zoom meeting and just do audio that way if you want to join that way. And if you're not able to get that figured out while we're doing the meeting today, just feel free to reach out to one of us and we can certainly answer your questions offline as well. So let's see. I don't see any other hand raised for those that are on the computer. Is anyone who doesn't have the ability to raise their hand, feel free to unmute yourself and let us know that you have a question. It's a quiet group. It was quiet, a little bit quiet last week too, so. Anyone have any questions or thoughts? Okay. Well, so as we mentioned, we're going to be doing this again next week, and we're all also available in between. Feel free to reach out to any of us with any questions or any clarifications, and we're happy to assist both during these times that we have set up to go over things as well as individually. So I'll just check one more time if there's anybody who wants to speak up that has any questions for us. Just a second for that. Okay. And so what you will see from us is we'll be sending out to the interested parties list a link to the video from both last week as well as this week that we're recording, as well as we'll send you a copy of the PowerPoint slides, and we'll send that to the interested parties list. And then we will be available next week as well for another virtual meeting. We hope everyone is doing well and hanging in there, and we appreciate you joining us this morning and spending some time with us virtually. And with that, Tim, you can stop recording the meeting, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
It's nice to see some